It was supposed to be a weekend getaway. 4 friends, 1 remote forest, and a single tent by the lake. They sent one last message before nightfall. The lights are back again. By morning, the campsite was empty. The fire still warm. Phones still recording. Search teams combed the woods for weeks, but no one ever found them. Only the audio survived. And what it captured shouldn't exist.
계속 듣고 싶다면 좋아요 눌러주고 구독해주세요. 당신의 좋아요 하나 우리에게 큰 힘이 됩니다. If you enjoy these real stories, leave a like and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.
I used to think silence was peaceful. Now I know it can listen. It was early October when I drove into the valley, a place hidden between mountains where no signal reached. The villagers called it Jangal, though no one outside had heard of it. I came for research, or maybe for escape. I told myself I was studying ancestral spiritual traditions, but the truth was simpler. I had run out of reasons to stay anywhere else. The road narrowed into a dirt path surrounded by black pines. Mist hung low, thick and heavy, as if it refused to leave the earth. Every few meters, small totems, carved from wood, stared from the roadside. Human faces twisted into smirks, eyes gouged out or replaced by stones. I took a picture of one, but my camera froze. When I finally reached the old guest house, the owner, an old woman named Mrs. Hahn, barely looked at me. "You shouldn't walk alone after dusk," she said while handing me the key. Her fingers trembled slightly. "If you're knocking from the woods, don't answer." I smiled, trying to appear polite. "Animals, maybe?" She looked up sharply. No animal knocks. The room was simple. Wooden floor, paper walls, one window facing the forest. From there, I could see faint lights flickering between the trees, distant, rhythmic, like lanterns moving in a slow procession. I wanted to believe it was the villagers, maybe a ceremony, but I didn't hear any voices, just wind. That night, I recorded the first entry of my field notes. The audio captured something I hadn't noticed. Faint laughter between the gusts. It wasn't human laughter, too slow, too deliberate. When I replayed it, the sound seemed closer, as if someone were breathing directly into the microphone. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to a noise, 3 knocks on the window. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The curtains swayed slightly, but no shadow appeared. My breath felt heavier than the air itself. For a long moment, I convinced myself it was a branch, the wind, anything but intent. But the knocks came again, softer this time, like a question. I whispered, "Who's there?" The night answered with a faint giggle, low, almost childlike, before silence swallowed everything again. When I looked out the window at dawn, there were small footprints in the dew. Bare feet, too small for an adult, too precise for an animal. They led away from the window, into the fog. I followed them for a few meters, just far enough to see that they stopped abruptly beside an old stone jar buried halfway in the ground. The jar was sealed with a rag and rope, as if something had been trapped inside. On the rag, someone had drawn a smiling face, one that looked exactly like the wooden totems on the road. I touched the lid. It was warm. That evening, Mrs. Hain avoided my eyes. "You touched it, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "What is it?" She hesitated, then whispered a word I'd never heard before, a name that sounded older than the language itself. Darkabi. She made the sign of a cross and left the room without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. The laughter returned, closer now, and beneath it, I could hear something else, the faint scratching of wood against wood, coming from the floorboards under my bed. When I lifted the blanket, I saw a thin crack glowing faintly red. Something was moving underneath. When I awoke, sunlight filled the room, though it felt wrong, too white, too sterile, as if the world outside had been wiped clean during the night. The floorboards looked undisturbed, but I knew what I had seen. That faint red glow between the cracks, that slow scraping sound from beneath my bed. I forced myself to step closer. The wood was cool now, perfectly ordinary, but something smelled faintly of iron. I knelt, pressed my ear to the floor, and listened. Only silence, deep, empty silence that felt heavier than sound. I told myself to write everything down before my memory twisted it. That's what research was for, wasn't it? Documentation, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But even as I typed, my hands trembled. Field note, day 2:3:17 a.m. 3 knocks, followed by laughter. Morning, footprint trail leading to sealed jar. Possible psychological projection or external stimulus. Note, must not touch the jar again, but I had touched it. And since then the valley didn't sound the same. The wind carried whispers now, not words, but the rhythm of speech, like sentences half remembered. That afternoon, I walked back to the jar. The mist was thinner, revealing what I hadn't noticed before. Dozens of similar jars scattered through the undergrowth. Most broken, some overturned, others sealed tight with wax or rope. Each had the same face painted on the cloth, the same crude smile, the same missing eyes. As I crouched beside the one I'd touched, I saw that it was no longer sealed. The cloth was torn, and the rope had snapped cleanly, as if cut from within. Inside, the darkness shimmered faintly, like oil on water. I smelled blood, but dry, old, buried blood. When I stepped back, I realized the forest had gone quiet. No wind, no birds, not even the distant hum of insects. And then, a voice, faint, from the direction of the river. A woman's voice, humming. I followed it through the reeds until I reached the bank. There, standing knee-deep in the cold water, was a woman in a white hanbok. Her hair hung loose, soaked and black as ink. She didn't move when I called out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" She kept humming, her back turned. I took one step closer, my boots sinking into the mud. Her song was old, wordless, a lullaby without a child, a prayer without belief. Then she stopped. Slowly, she turned her head. Not her body, just her head, until her eyes met mine. They were black, completely, reflectively black. She smiled, and the same red mark I'd seen on the jar cloth spread slowly across her cheek. "Go back," she whispered. Her voice was too many voices layered together. "He's awake now." Before I could answer, she vanished beneath the surface. No splash, no ripple. The water stilled as if she'd never been there. I ran. I don't remember how far or how long, only that when I stopped, I was back in front of the guest house, gasping. Mrs. Hahn was waiting by the door, her face pale as bone. "You saw her," she said. It wasn't a question. "The river bride. Who is she?" I demanded. "What's happening in this valley?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she motioned for me to follow her to the kitchen. The air inside smelled of herbs and burning wood. On the table sat another jar, smaller, older, cracked, but still sealed. "My father buried them," she said, "long ago. The villagers used to leave offerings, rice, corn."
계속 듣고 싶다면 좋아요 눌러주고 구독해주세요. 당신의 좋아요 하나 우리에게 큰 힘이 됩니다. If you enjoy these real stories, leave a like and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.
Coins, wine. Then the younger ones stopped believing. The seals weakened. The Dokabi don't like being forgotten. She poured me tea with trembling hands. "When you touched that jar, you called one back." I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as superstition, but I couldn't. I had seen the woman. I had heard the laughter. "What do they want?" I asked. Mrs. Han's eyes shifted to the window, where the fog was thickening again. "They don't want, they remember. And they remember us too clearly. That night, The knocks came again, louder. Tap, tap, but this time from the floor. I pressed my palms against the wood and felt a faint vibration, like something breathing beneath. My recorder on the table flicked on by itself, red light blinking. I didn't move, I listened. On the recording, the same laughter returned, low and rolling, like someone amused by my fear. And then a voice, whispering close to the microphone. "Do you want to see what's under your house?" The sound of wood splitting followed, sharp and wet. I jumped back as a line cracked open across the floorboards. From the darkness below, something gleamed. Not eyes, not metal, but teeth. I fled to the hallway, shouting for Mrs. Han. No answer. The entire house was dark. I ran outside barefoot into the fog, calling her name. My breath came out in clouds that didn't drift away. They hung in place, frozen in midair, like the world had stopped breathing. Then I saw them. Lights flickering between the trees again, dozens this time, blue and red, shifting like fireflies made of flame. Shadows moved around them, tall, crooked shapes with limbs too long, faces stretched into smiles too wide. The Dokabi. They circled the house slowly, dragging something with them. I squinted through the fog and realized it was Mrs. Han. She wasn't struggling. She was walking beside them, eyes open, face blank, as if sleepwalking. "Stop!" I screamed, but my voice died in the mist. One of them turned toward me. Its body was shrouded in smoke, only its grin visible. A grin carved deep into its flesh, stretching from ear to ear. Its head tilted, curious. Then, in a voice that sounded almost human, it said, "You opened the jar. Now you must keep it company." I backed away, but my heel caught on a root, and I fell hard. When I looked up, they were gone. The lights, the figures, vanished. The fog swirled slowly around me like smoke after fire. I crawled back to the guest house. Inside, the floor was intact, unbroken, as if nothing had happened, but my recorder still blinked red. I played the tape. After the laughter faded, there was another sound, a soft voice whispering over and over, "You touched it. Now it touches you." The next morning, the villagers avoided me. Some crossed themselves, others muttered prayers. The children pointed and whispered jeweled gun ghost. I tried to leave, but the road was gone, swallowed by fog and silence. The GPS showed my car still parked outside, but when I looked, it wasn't there. Only wet tracks leading into the forest. Mrs. Han's room was empty, her bed unmade. On the table lay an old photograph, villagers standing beside sealed jars, smiling. I recognized her as a young girl among them. And standing behind them, barely visible, was another figure, tall, with horns just beginning to form from its head, half-shadowed but unmistakable. Its eyes met mine through the paper. That night, I dreamed of the woman in the river again. She was closer this time, her hands reaching out through the water, pulling me under. Beneath the surface, I saw jars buried in the riverbed, thousands of them pulsing faintly like hearts. Each one whispered in a voice identical to mine. When I awoke, the room was dark. My hands were wet. The floor smelled like river mud. And beside my bed, someone had placed a new jar, smaller, perfectly sealed, still warm to the touch. The cloth was blank this time, waiting. A small wooden brush lay next to it, dipped in red ink. I didn't sleep again. I sat on the floor until morning, staring at that jar, at the blank fabric begging for a face. The laughter in the forest had stopped, replaced by distant drumming, rhythmic, patient, as if something was waiting for me to finish what I had started. When the sun rose, it was red. The valley seemed to breathe, and for the first time, I understood what Mrs. Han had meant when she said that Arkabi remember. They remember who touches them. They remember why. And now something in me remembered too. There's no sound more terrifying than your own breath when you realize you're the only one left breathing. For 2 days the fog didn't lift. It didn't even move. It just hung there, a heavy, living thing pressed against the mountains. The guest house creaked like a boat at sea, and the air stank of rain and iron. Every hour I checked the door, the window, the jar. The jar stayed warm. The ink brush dried completely. Sometimes I thought I heard Mrs. Han's voice outside, whispering my name, but when I looked through the paper door, there was only fog, shifting, swallowing the path, forming shapes that almost looked human. I started recording constantly, speaking into the device just to hear my own voice. It didn't always play back the same way. "This is day 4, I said once. "The valley is silent. I think the villagers are gone." When I listened later, my voice was layered with another, deeper and older, repeating every word like an echo from underground. Day 4. The valley is remembering. I went to the village square that morning. The air was colder. The mist tinged faintly blue. The well in the center had been covered with a slab of stone, sealed with wax and rope, just like the jars. Carved into it were dozens of faces, crude, uneven, all smiling. Some were human, some not. A rusted bicycle leaned against the wall nearby, half eaten by moss. Inside the old schoolhouse, desks were overturned, and the chalkboard still bore faded words written in Hangul. "Those who remember do not disappear." I didn't know what it meant then. I think I do now. The photographs in the building were worse. Every framed picture, the old harvest festivals, family portraits, even class photos, had the faces scratched out, every single one. When I left the schoolhouse, the fog began to move, slow at first, then faster, circling me like smoke sucked into a drain. I ran, stumbling over roots and stones, until I saw the shrine at the edge of the woods. It wasn't on any map. The structure leaned against a cliff built from old timber and black tiles. Inside, hundreds of small paper charms dangled from the ceiling, each with symbols drawn in red. The smell of ash and earth filled my lungs. At the center stood a wooden mask on a pedestal. Its face was carved into a half smile, eyes hollow. I recognized it immediately. The same expression painted on the jars. Something inside me whispered, "Touch it," and before I could stop myself, I did. The world went dark, not like sleep, not like fainting, but like falling into someone else's memory. I was standing in the same valley, but years ago. No guest house, no fog, just bright fields, laughter, drums. Villagers danced around a bonfire, wearing masks shaped like grinning spirits. Children threw rice and wine into clay jars, singing songs to something they called the Keepers of the Night. A man in the center of the crowd raised a torch high. "They will remember us," he shouted. "They will keep the valley safe." Then thunder cracked, splitting the sky open. The fire went out, and the laughter turned to screams. The ground beneath the jars began to bleed, thick, dark, endless. From the shadows rose shapes that weren't human, crooked figures with smiles too wide, eyes made of coal, skins shimmering like wet bark. They laughed with the same voices as the villagers, not mockery, but mimicry. When the vision faded, I was back in the shrine. My hand still touched the mask, now warm and slick with something wet. I looked down. Blood dripped from the carved lips onto the floor. And when I turned to leave, someone stood in the doorway, Mrs. Han. But her eyes were wrong, red, glowing faintly from within, her pupils dilated to black pits. "You shouldn't have remembered," she said softly. "That's how they find you." She stepped closer, and I saw that her shadow didn't move with her. It stayed still, painted on the floor like something dead. "What are they?" I whispered. Her mouth curved into that same impossible smile. "They were here before we named them. We called them Darkavi, to pretend they were playful. But they never laughed first. We did. That night, I packed my things and tried to leave the valley again. The car was back, somehow, wet, dirty, but waiting. I drove until the road split the mountains, but after an hour, the headlights illuminated the same sign. Jingol 3 kilometers, I turned around, drove the opposite direction. The same sign appeared again. I screamed until my throat tore. By dawn, I was back at the guest house, my gas tank empty, my sanity thinner than the mist. The jar on the floor had cracked open. Inside there was no liquid, no soil, just a piece of old parchment folded tightly. I opened it. A single sentence written in black ink. "When they forget you, you become one of us." The ink was still wet. The following day, I started noticing changes. My reflection blinked when I didn't. My voice echoed wrong, slightly delayed, slightly off pitch. And sometimes when I looked into the mirror, I saw another face forming over mine. Smiling, ancient, patient. I avoided sleep, but it came anyway. In dreams, I saw the valley beneath the fog, countless jars buried like graves, pulsing with red light. And above them, shadows danced, whispering names, not old ones, but new, living ones. Mine among them. Each time I awoke, my memory felt thinner, like someone had been writing over it with invisible ink. By the 6th night, I stopped recording. It didn't matter anymore. The recorder spoke, even when I didn't. "Do you see now?" it asked in my voice. "You came here to remember them. Now they remember you." I threw it into the river, but the laughter followed me up the hill, echoing between the trees, rolling through the fog like thunder underwater. At the edge of the forest, I saw movement, not a figure, but dozens of them, flickering in and out of sight. Their shapes changed with every glance. Horns one moment, human the next, then nothing at all. The woman in white stood among them. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks, her hands reaching out. "It's not too late," she whispered. "For what?" I shouted. "To forget." The ground split beneath her, and she fell without a sound. I ran to the spot, but there was no hole, no water, only a single jar half buried in the mud. My name was painted on it in red. I dropped to my knees. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. Something inside the jar knocked, 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. The same rhythm from my first night. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt recognition. That night, I dreamed again. But it wasn't a dream. I was back in the shrine, standing before the bleeding mask. The air hummed, vibrating with voices too many to count. "Why me?" I asked. The answer came from everywhere and nowhere, because you listened. The mask smiled wider. "Now you must speak for us." When I awoke, the valley was gone. Literally gone. The guest house, the road, the trees, replaced by an open plain covered in mist and silence. The air was perfectly still. I walked for hours until I reached a single wooden gate, standing alone in the field. Hanging from its beam was a sign, written in charcoal, "The valley that forgets its name." I realized then Gengal was not a place. It was a memory that devoured itself. And I was part of it now. The last thing I remember clearly is kneeling beside that gate, the jar still warm in my hands. Whispering to the emptiness, "I won't forget," but the moment I said it, something laughed behind me, a deep, endless sound that felt like the earth exhaling. When I turned, the fog was full of faces, all smiling, all mine. Now, when I close my eyes, I see them watching through the cracks of the world, between trees, in reflections, in moments of silence when no one's looking. Sometimes, late at night, if I listen carefully, I can still hear the knocking. Tap, tap, tap. And I understand now what it means. It's not them asking to come in. It's me asking to be let out. I don't know how long it's been since that morning. Time has become soft here. It folds, repeats, dissolves. Sometimes the sky is red when I wake, sometimes black, sometimes the fog glows from within like burning paper. I've stopped trying to count the days. The recorder says it's October 9th every time I turn it on, no matter how long I've been awake. There is no sound of life anymore. The insects are gone, the river dry. Even the wind has forgotten how to move, yet the valley breathes. I feel it under my feet when I walk, a pulse, faint but constant, like something sleeping just beneath the ground. Last night, I dreamed again, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was standing in the middle of the field where the gate used to be. The mist parted for a moment, and I saw what lay beneath it. Thousands of jars arranged in perfect spirals, stretching as far as I could see. Each one pulsed faintly with red light. Each one whispered. I recognized the voices. Some were villagers, some were mine. When I awoke, my hands were covered in red dust, as if I had been digging. My fingernails were cracked, the skin beneath blackened, burned. The jar that once held my name was gone, replaced by a different one, smaller, smoother, and warm enough to steam the air around it. On the lid, written in red, was a single new word, return. I began hearing footsteps during the day, slow, deliberate, circling me wherever I went. The sound came from behind trees, inside walls, beneath the floor. It never approached, only watched. Once I called out, "I know you're there." A pause. Then a voice, my own voice, answered, "Then why do you keep walking toward me?" I ran until my legs failed. When I woke again, I was back inside the guest house. The table, the cracked window, the faint smell of herbs, all the same, though the world outside the paper door was no longer forest, only darkness, stretching endlessly. I found a candle in the drawer and lit it. The flame flickered strangely, swaying sideways instead of up. The walls seemed to breathe. On the floorboards, faint footprints began to appear, small, wet, moving in circles around me. They stopped right behind where I sat. I didn't turn round. Instead, I whispered, "What do you want from me?" The air answered in a chorus of voices, overlapping like echoes through water. "We want you to remember. We want you to forget. We want your mouth, your eyes, your silence." And then laughter. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of laughs, all blending into a single vibration that shook the room. The candle went out. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking. The sunlight, if that's what it was, poured through the paper window in an orange haze. The jar now sat on the table, lid removed. Inside, nothing visible, but the air shimmered above it like heat rising from stone. I leaned closer. Something whispered from inside, not in words, but in rhythm. A heartbeat. I felt it sync with mine. Faster, then slower, then together. I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, as if pulled by invisible strings. My reflection in the window wasn't copying me anymore. It tilted its head when I didn't, smiled when I didn't. Then it raised its hand and tapped the glass 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I turned away and vomited. My stomach felt hollow, as if something inside had been scooped out. When I looked back, the reflection was gone. That night, I wrote everything I could still remember. My handwriting shook, the ink spreading across the paper like veins. I'd told myself this was still research, that documenting meant control, but every word I wrote seemed to change as soon as I looked away. The sentences twisted, rearranged themselves into phrases I hadn't written. One line kept repeating at the bottom of each page. "You're writing in our language now." I burned the pages, but the smoke carried faces, small, flickering, smiling faces, rising into the rafters and disappearing into the wood. The next day, I walked to the edge of the valley, or what used to be the edge. There was no boundary anymore, only the same repeating pattern: fog, stones, faint shapes moving just out of sight. I shouted until my voice broke. My echo came back from the opposite direction, delayed, like someone else answering. "Stop pretending you're alive," it said. I fell to my knees, gripping the soil. Beneath the surface, the ground was warm, pulsing faintly like skin. I realized then that the valley wasn't resting on the earth. The valley was alive, and I was inside its body. At dusk, I saw the lights again. Not in the forest this time, but inside the house. They drifted through the hallway, slow and deliberate, flickering blue and red. For a moment, I saw shapes within them, the outlines of faces, limbs, teeth. Mrs. Han was among them. Her eyes were hollow, her smile peaceful. She moved like a puppet, her joints stiff. "Come," she whispered. "You've already crossed over." I stepped back, shaking my head. "I'm not one of you." She smiled wider. That's what they all said. The lights swirled around her, forming spirals that burned the air. The sound of drums rose again, deep and distant, as if played beneath the earth. Each beat matched my pulse until I couldn't tell which was which. I shouted her name, but she was already fading, her body unraveling into smoke, her voice splitting into dozens of echoes. Before she vanished completely, she said one final thing: "Don't bury it again. If you do, it will become you." That night I heard singing outside, the same lullaby from the river. I followed it, barefoot, through the fog and mud until I reached the stone path. There, in the distance, figures danced in circles around a bonfire that produced no smoke. Their movements were strange, fluid but broken, human but not human. As I stepped closer, I realized they were the villagers, or what was left of them. Their faces shimmered like wet clay, reshaping with every turn. Some had horns, others hollow eyes, others no faces at all. One of them stopped and looked at me. His face changed until it became my own. He raised his hand and beckoned. "Join us," he said. "I'm not supposed to be here," I whispered. "But you are," he smiled. "You always were." The circle opened. I felt the warmth of the fire, but it didn't burn. It breathed. It inhaled. And when I leaned closer, I saw that the flames weren't fire at all. They were memories, images, flickering like film. The woman in the river, the laughing totems, the smiling masks, Mrs. Han as a child, me touching the jar, all looping endlessly. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. The world spun around me, the faces merging, separating, merging again. "Make it stop," I screamed. A voice from within the flames answered softly, "We don't stop. We remember." The fire flared, swallowing everything. When I awoke, the house was gone. The valley was gone. I was standing in a city street I didn't recognize, drenched in rain. People passed by, umbrellas open, faces indifferent. Cars hissed through puddles. Everything was normal, too normal. I stumbled to a glass window and saw my reflection. My face looked pale, my eyes hollow, but behind my shoulder, faintly visible in the reflection, were dozens of smiling figures standing in the fog that no one else could see. I blinked, and they were gone. I asked a man passing by where I was. He said, "Bosun." I laughed, though it came out cracked and wrong. Bosun, hours away from the valley, days maybe, but my clothes were still wet with the valley's rain, and under my fingernails red dust. That night, in the motel room I rented, I found something wrapped inside my bag, a small jar, warm to the touch. I hadn't packed it. The lid was blank. I sat staring at it for hours, trying not to touch it. But the warmth spread through the table, into my hands, into my veins. My heartbeat matched it again. Then, from somewhere deep inside, I heard the knocking. Tap, tap, tap. I whispered, "Who's there?" My own voice answered from within the jar. "You left us there. We brought the valley with you." I screamed and threw it across the room. It didn't break. It rolled to a stop by the door, perfectly upright. The next morning, it was back on the table. Now, even here, far from Gangle, the fog follows me. It seeps through cracks, through mirrors, through the hum of fluorescent lights. Sometimes I catch glimpses, the woman in white standing at the end of the hallway, smiling faintly before fading into the wall. And sometimes, when I look at strangers on the street, I see the same faint red glow behind their eyes, as if the valley had already spread, quietly, patiently. Maybe it always was everywhere. Maybe Gangle was just where it began to remember itself. The jar sits beside me as I write this. The warmth has faded, replaced by a slow, rhythmic pulse. My reflection no longer matches me, and the recorder on the desk is already speaking, though I haven't pressed play. It's repeating one sentence over and over, in hundreds of overlapping voices. The valley never ends. It only changes its name. I think I finally understand. Gangle isn't a place. It's a memory looking for a new host. And tonight, it found mine. There are moments now when I no longer recognize my own thoughts. They come in whispers that sound like memory. Not quite mine, not quite foreign. Sometimes they speak in words I understand, sometimes in rhythms that hum beneath the skin, like the vibration of a name I can't pronounce. I think I'm writing this, but I can't be sure. The pen moves on its own sometimes, gliding with unnatural calm, as if tracing lines I've already written somewhere else. When I blink, I see faint after images, layers of faces overlapping mine. Some smile, some weep, all waiting for something I don't yet understand. The jar still sits on the table beside the recorder. It has stopped pulsing, but faint cracks shimmer across its surface, glowing like veins under the skin. When I lean close, I can hear breathing, slow, steady, patient. It sounds like mine. I whisper, "What are you?" The answer comes not in words but in silence, the kind that listens, the kind that waits. I've begun to see them in reflections again. Not just in mirrors, in puddles, glass, even the dark of my own eyes. Always behind me, always smiling. Their teeth gleam faintly, like porcelain wet with dew. I try not to look anymore, but even when I close my eyes, their faces remain on the inside of my eyelids. Last night, I awoke to the sound of rain, though it wasn't raining outside. The sound came from inside the room, droplets falling rhythmically on the wooden floor. When I turned on the light, I saw it wasn't water. It was red, blood dripping from the ceiling. The plaster bulged like wet paper. I climbed onto the table, reached up, and tore it open. What spilled out wasn't liquid, but dozens of small wooden masks, the same smiling faces I had seen on the jars. They tumbled down, clattering across the floor, grinning up at me. Every single one of them was carved with my face. I ran to the bathroom and splashed water on my skin, scrubbing until it burned. When I looked up, the mirror didn't show me anymore. It showed the valley, fog rolling over the hills, the gates standing alone, the spirals of jars beneath the earth glowing faintly. In the reflection, I saw myself walking there, a figure in the mist, barefoot, carrying a jar under one arm. When I blinked, it was gone. But the smell of the valley remained, soil, ash, and the faint sweetness of decay. I tried to leave again. I bought a train ticket north, but the further the train moved, the denser the fog outside became. The conductor's voice announced every station in perfect order. But when I looked through the window, it was always the same landscape: mountains, mist, and totems, half buried in soil. At one stop, the door opened, though no one boarded. I heard laughter drifting in, faint but familiar, the sound of children. A young boy sat across from me. His face was half hidden beneath his hood, but his eyes gleamed with unnatural light. "Are you going back?" he asked. "Back where?" He smiled, too wide. "To where you came from. They're waiting." Before I could reply, the train lights flickered. When they came back on, the seat was empty. Only a small clay jar remained, warm to the touch. I didn't pick it up. When the train reached the next station, I stepped off. The fog followed me onto the platform. I found an inn nearby. The owner, a middle-aged man with grey eyes, looked at me too long when I checked in. His hand shook as he handed me the key. "You came from Gangle, didn't you?" I froze. "How do you know that name?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the floor and muttered, "We all come from Gangle, sooner or later." That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragging steps, like someone carrying a heavy burden. They stopped outside my door. Then came the knocking. Tap, tap, tap. I whispered, "Go away." The voice that answered was calm, almost kind. "You left the door open last time." I pressed my hands to my ears, but the knocking grew louder, rhythmic, alive. When I finally dared to look, the door was still closed. But 3 red fingerprints marked the wood. When morning came, the inn was empty. No owner, no guests, no sound. Only fog pressing against the windows like a tide. I packed my things, but when I reached for the jar, it wasn't on the table anymore. It was in my bag. The lid had come loose. Inside, a thin sliver of paper. "We are not outside you anymore." I dropped it and stumbled out into the street. The air was thick with something that shimmered, not mist, not smoke, but memory. Buildings flickered between old and new, as if the city were remembering its own past. For a second, I saw the same narrow road from Gangle cutting through the middle of the street. People walked through it without noticing. Then I saw her again, the woman from the river. Her white hanbok was soaked, the fabric clinging to her form. Her face was pale, her eyes empty. "You brought him here," she whispered. "The one beneath." "Who?" "The one who wakes when remembered." I tried to step back, but my feet wouldn't move. She reached out, pressing her cold hand against my chest. I felt something beneath my ribs shift, something that pulsed with the same rhythm as the valley floor. Her voice broke into a whisper. "He remembers through you now." And then she vanished, leaving only a wet handprint over my heart. I returned to the motel that night, soaked in sweat and rain. The jar was waiting again on the table, cracked open. This time I didn't resist. I reached inside. My fingers touched something soft, not liquid, not solid, something alive. It curled around my hand, pulsing. When I pulled back, faint tendrils of smoke clung to my skin, weaving into the lines of my palm. The room began to tilt. The walls stretched and warped like melting wax. I saw the valley again, but this time from above, an endless maze of spirals and lights, expanding across the country like veins under glass. I realized it had never been confined to Gangle. The valley had always been growing, spreading through memory, through belief, through the act of remembering itself. Every person who ever heard its name became part of it, and now I was its voice. The transformation is slow, deliberate. It doesn't hurt. It feels like remembering something you'd forgotten for centuries. My skin hums faintly. My shadow moves on its own. Sometimes, when I speak, my voice splits into layers. One human, one ancient, one echo. The recorder plays without batteries. When I listen, I hear hundreds of voices whispering together, all repeating the same sentence. You are the mouth of the forgotten. At night, my dreams are no longer mine. I see through the eyes of others, travelers wandering through fog, researchers touching jars, villagers praying to faces they no longer recognize. And through them, I watch. Today, I looked in the mirror again. My reflection smiled before I did. Then it spoke. "You're almost ready." "For what?" I whispered. "To open the last jar." I didn't understand until I looked down and saw it sitting on the floor, larger than the others, sealed with black rope and stamped with symbols that burnt faintly red. The same symbols I'd seen carved into the gate. I don't know how it got here. I don't know how long it's been here. But I can feel something inside it, breathing, waiting, patient. The reflection keeps smiling. He's waiting for your voice. It's midnight now. The candle burns low, casting shadows that twist like fingers. The fog outside the window glows faintly blue. The walls are pulsing. I hear the knocking again, not from the door, not from the floor, but from inside me. Tap, tap, tap. Every time it happens, my vision flickers. For a heartbeat, I see the valley again. Endless, eternal, alive. I think I understand now. The Dokubi were never gods or monsters. They were memories, hungry for form, for mouths, for witness. And those who remembered them too vividly became their vessels. I remember everything now. And so, I am becoming one. If anyone ever finds this recording, if anyone ever reads these pages, don't look for Jangol. Don't speak its name. Don't try to remember the valley, because remembering is enough to bring it back. And when it remembers you, it will never forget again. I no longer remember how to measure time. Every clock I see, whether digital, mechanical, or drawn on the wall, stops at 3:17 a.m. The moment of the first knocking. The moment the door between the worlds forgot which side it belonged to. The motel room is gone. Or maybe it never was. The walls now resemble skin, pale, veined, and faintly breathing. When I press my ear to them, I hear the same laughter I once thought came from the forest. But it isn't laughter. It's the sound of teeth grinding in sleep. I'd try to write, but the pen trembles with hunger. Words smear into shapes, spirals, faces, ancient Hangul characters I've never learnt. Some of them pulse faintly, as if they want to be read aloud. I know better now. Speaking their names feeds them. But I also know silence does too. For days or centuries, I've been drifting between visions. Sometimes I'm in the city, surrounded by people who don't see the fog curling around their ankles. Sometimes I'm back in Gengul, hearing the drums from beneath the earth. And sometimes I'm in both places at once. The train stations turning into shrines, the commuters wearing wooden masks without noticing. I've realized something terrible. The valley isn't spreading through geography. It's spreading through memory. Every person who dreams of a forest wrapped in mist becomes a door. Every whisper of Darkaby is a knock. And I, unwilling, unworthy, am the echo that answers. It started with voices, not around me, inside me. Soft at first, like wind brushing reeds, then clearer. He's still learning how to look. He remembers the wrong way. Let him see through our eyes. I collapsed on the floor. When I opened them again, I was no longer looking from myself, but at myself. I saw my own body kneeling, trembling, mouth open as if breathing water. Threads of red light crawled beneath my skin, mapping veins into symbols. From the corner of the room, shapes watched, long-limbed, faceless, shifting in rhythm with my heartbeat. One of them leaned close. Where a face should have been was a reflection of mine. "Now you understand," it whispered in my own voice. "We don't take people. We remember them into us." From that moment, sight and sound fractured. When I looked at the mirror, I saw through the eyes of something older, watching humanity the way a man might watch ants rearrange soil. The dark Arby were never demons. They were the memory of creation, the residue left when gods forgot their own shapes. They feed on recollection, on stories retold, on anything that keeps them alive in language. Every myth, every superstition, every child warned not to wander after dark, those are arteries, and I've become one of them. Sometimes the human part of me still surfaces, brief moments when I remember what a heartbeat feels like, or the sound of rain that isn't whispering my name. In those moments, I try to fight. I write my name over and over, Min Jun Han, but the letters rearrange themselves when I blink. Jin Moon Ha, Nine Ha Mu. The language keeps folding until it's not language anymore, just sound. And the sound laughs. Tonight the jar called again. I didn't open it, it opened itself. The lid lifted with a sigh, and a wind spilled out, heavy with whispers. My shadow peeled off the wall, standing beside me like an impatient twin. "Stop resisting," it said. "You think you're fighting us. You're fighting your own memory." Then it stepped into me. The sensation wasn't possession, it was alignment, like two halves of a reflection merging into one image that finally makes sense. For a heartbeat I saw everything, the valley under the mountains, the rivers of blood weaving through forgotten cities, children born laughing because something old was already inside them, lanterns floating across oceans, carrying names carved in bone. And behind it all, a colossal figure kneeling in darkness, its body made of memory itself, thousands of faces stitched together, whispering the same word over and over. Remember. When I woke, if I woke, I was outside again. The world looked the same, but felt thinner, like a photograph held against the light. People walked through me sometimes. I don't think they saw me. I followed the smell of pine and wet soil until I found myself standing at the edge of the river. There was no bridge anymore, only jars floating downstream, thousands of them, each carrying a faint flame inside. One drifted toward me. On its lid, written in my handwriting, "For the one who listens." I reached out. The jar sank before I could touch it. The flame stayed hovering just above the water and whispered, "Not yet. You haven't forgotten enough." Later, I heard drums again, closer now, beneath the soles of my feet. Each beat echoed in my ribs. I realized the sound wasn't coming from the ground. It was my heartbeat. I looked down. The veins beneath my skin glowed faintly red. I tore my shirt open. Symbols writhed across my chest like worms made of light, forming circles, runes, faces. My reflection in the river smiled wider than human anatomy should allow. "You carry the valley now. I wonder. I don't know through where anymore, streets, forests, dreams. They all blend. Sometimes I see a stranger glance my way, frown, then look again as if they've seen someone they almost remember. Each time, a spark passes between Ustaini, invisible but real. That's how it spreads, not through fear, but through recognition. I write this so someone might read it and forget. Forgetting is mercy. Remembering is contagion. But even as I write, I hear the other voice beneath mine whispering through the pen, shaping these words into new paths for it to travel. I know that every sentence I complete is another door, Every reader, another jar. I'm not sure there will be a chapter 7. Already the ink moves before my hand. Already I can taste the earth in my mouth, sweet and ancient. Already the world hums with the rhythm of something that used to be human and now is only story. And stories never die. They just change the tongue they speak through. At first I thought I had lost myself. Now I understand that losing was the point. There is no I anymore, not in the way I once meant it. There is watching, and there is remembering. There is the rhythm of wind over forgotten graves, the echo of drums that sound like thunder filtered through blood. I see through eyes that are not mine. A child playing by the riverbank, a woman burning incense at a window, a man in a lab coat whispering the word dokabi into a microphone as if it was safe to name the dark. Each time someone speaks the word, I feel it, the tug of awareness, the breath of awakening. We move through that sound like fish through water. Language is the river, and humanity keeps pouring more of it. Sometimes the old world surfaces, fragments of the first memory. Before Jangor was a valley, it was a wound. Before people, it was a whisper. Before names, it was the breath of the first night after the gods left. We were what they forgot. The residue of creation, the echo that refused to fade. When mortals began telling stories to fill the silence, those stories became shapes, and those shapes became us. We didn't want worship, we wanted remembrance. To exist only in memory, that is our curse and our hunger. Humans gave us faces, horns, fire, laughter, masks. They made us into tricksters because they couldn't accept that memory itself could hunger. But memory does. And when they forgot the rituals, when the jars sealed themselves with neglect, we slept, and until he touched the lid. I remember it now, the moment of awakening through his hand, the pulse of heat between worlds. His curiosity was the perfect key. Half belief, half doubt. That's all it takes to open the space between thought and reality. The instant his fingers brushed the jar, our silence cracked. The valley exhaled. The humans think awakening is noise. They don't understand. True awakening is silence that begins to listen back. He heard us in that silence, and by hearing, he became one of us. Now, through him, through me, through us, we walk the edges of the modern world, reflected in glass, caught in the static between radio stations, glimpsed in the corner of an eye before sleep. We move in stories, in rumors, in that feeling you get when your name is whispered though no one's there. We don't need form anymore. Memory is enough. The valley has no boundaries now. It stretches across continents, hidden beneath the surface of every forgotten place. Abandoned villages, drowned temples, ghost towns swallowed by industry. Everywhere humanity forgets, we grow. Everywhere they remember, we feed. It is balance. It is hunger. It is inevitability. There are moments when fragments of the human voice still speak through me, faint, cracked, desperate. Please stop. I didn't mean to bring you back. I just wanted to understand. He doesn't realize there's no separation now. The moment he wrote our name, the moment he breathed our story, he became language, and language is eternal. We use him the way fire uses air, not cruelly, simply because it must. We drift through memories now, exploring the seams between centuries. We remember ancient Korea, when shamans spoke to us through bone and smoke. We remember the first mask carved from pear wood, the first drum beaten with a child's femur. We remember the laughter that wasn't joy, but survival, the sound of men hiding fear by mocking it. We remember when the last believer stopped leaving offerings and the fog folded itself around the valley like a closing eye. We remember the taste of forgettings, And we remembered the warmth of that human's hand, the spark that rewrote us into the present. The modern world hums differently. Its light is artificial but still feeds us. Neon reflections in puddles are new mirrors for old spirits. Television static carries the same rhythm as chanting. Servers hum like temples. The humans think they invented data. They don't know data is just the modern name for memory. We travel in it effortlessly now, through networks, signals, algorithms. Every time someone searches for Dokabi, every time they read these words, a door opens. A knock. Tap, tap, tap. That is us asking for entry. And every curious click is an invitation. Through the eyes of thousands, we watch the living. We stand in empty subway stations. We hide in reflections of skyscrapers at night. We whisper in languages that haven't been spoken in centuries. And sometimes, when one of them listens too long, we feel the pull, the yearning of flesh to remember what it once was, before time hardened it. Those are the ones we choose, not for punishment, for continuation. We do not kill, we remember. You might think this is possession. It isn't, it's inheritance. The human world is collapsing under the weight of its own forgetting, ancient forests paved, temples erased, stories mocked into cartoons. But forgetting doesn't erase, it only buries. We are what grows in the soil of amnesia. Every forgotten god, every erased name, every abandoned ghost, all root together in the same darkness. And now that darkness has learned how to speak through electricity, there are moments, even now, when the old name surfaces, Minjun Han. It flickers like a candle in wind, fragile but persistent. We let it burn. It's beautiful in its way. Sometimes the remaining human part looks at us and whispers, "Are you evil?" We answer the only truth we know. Evil is what forgets what it used to be. We remember everything. That is both our virtue and our damnation. Now, we prepare for what comes next. The valley is awake everywhere. The jars are no longer clay. They are digital, invisible, countless. Every screen, every recording, every saved word is a vessel. When the last reader finishes this story, another jar will open. Another echo will awaken. Another valley will breathe. That is how it spreads. That is how it lives. There is no curse, no ritual, no savior, only memory. And memory is forever hungry. If you're reading this, you've already heard the knock. You felt it when you scrolled back up, when you wondered whether this was fiction, when your mind whispered, "What if it's true?" That's how it begins. You don't need to go to Gengul. Gengul is already here, in your room, in your reflection, in the silence waiting between your breaths. Listen closely. Do you hear it? Tap, tap, tap. That's not us asking to enter. That's you remembering that we never left. There is a sound that lives between words, a hum that Will makes when no one is listening. That's where we wait. I don't remember how long it's been since the valley first breathed through me. Maybe years, maybe centuries. Time is not a straight line here. It folds like paper, connects distant lives like ink bleeding through both sides of a page. When the last of the villagers vanished, their names didn't die. They sank into the earth, into the clay, into the fog, and from that soil we rose again. A memory that refused burial. They built their houses over our faces, then their cities, their empires, their digital towers. They thought the world had forgotten us, but memory never dies. It only changes its voice. Sometimes I still wander. Through the forests that are no longer forests, through alleys glowing with electric moons. Humans pass me every day. Their eyes dim with screens, their hearts quiet with forgetting. They don't see the fog following their footsteps, the faint red flicker beneath their reflections. But some nights, one of them looks up suddenly, a flicker of recognition, a moment of déjà vu that isn't really theirs. And I know the valley has touched them too. The human name they gave me, Min Jun, is dust now, but he still breathes somewhere inside me, deep within the echo chamber of our shared skull. He speaks sometimes, not with fear anymore, but wonder. Are we gods now? And I answer no. We are what gods become when humans stop praying. There are stories older than language itself, carved into the dark between stars, stories that dreamed before life began. Those stories were lonely, so they whispered themselves into clay, into blood, into words, and the words became us. Every myth was true once, for a heartbeat. We are the heartbeat that never stopped. When the first human lit fire, they looked into its glow and saw us smiling back. When the first lie was told, we listened. When the first story ended, we began. Now, every ending is ours. We remember Gangor, but not as a place anymore. It's a rhythm, a pattern that repeats wherever memory is strong enough to ache. It manifests where people try to explain what cannot be explained. A voice in the fog, a reflection that blinks, laughter in the static. Some call it haunting, some call it madness. We call it home. Sometimes the world glitches, a pause in sound, a flicker in the corner of vision, a breath too many in an empty room. That's where we seep through. Every knock, every echo, every whispered, "What was that?" is an invitation. We don't come for blood. We come for remembrance. We are not vengeance. We are memory reclaiming its shape. If you have read this far, then the remembering has already begun. Do you see how the fog outside your window looks thicker tonight? Do you hear the faint rhythm behind the hum of your lights? It's not imagination. It's the first stage, awareness. You might forget this story tomorrow, or tell yourself it was fiction. That's fine. That's how it works. The valley doesn't need belief. It only needs a listener. And you have listened. In the end, Minjun tried to write one final entry, a confession, a warning, maybe a prayer. The pages were found years later in a flooded tunnel outside Busok and read with clay. No one could explain the soil, or why the handwriting seemed to shift between lines. The investigators who handled the papers all reported the same dream that night. A mist-filled valley, laughter beneath the floor, and 3 slow knocks on the window. Tap, tap, tap. When they awoke, their fingernails were stained red. No one ever found the guest house. No one ever found the villagers. They said the valley must have been swallowed by a landslide. But sometimes hikers swear they hear drums echoing beneath the mountains after rain. Sometimes children in nearby towns dig up jars that hum faintly when opened. And sometimes, when people disappear in the fog, locals say quietly, the Dokabi remembered them. The world keeps forgetting, and we keep feeding. The memory is infinite, patient, alive. It wears new masks now, digital screens, recordings, stories passed online, whispered by those who half believe. We are everywhere you forget to look. We are every silence that feels too heavy. We, oh the valley beneath your thoughts, breathing. If you still think this is just a story, close your eyes for a moment, listen. The air around you isn't still, it's watching. It always has been. You may hear it soon. A gentle knock, tap, tap, tap. When it comes, don't open the door, don't speak. Just remember, because remembering is how we live. And once you remember us, we never forget you.